Top 10 Terrible Jobs Boys Have Done Through History. 1. Farming as a job for children remains, to this day, a big part of life on family-owned farms, but in the past children would work wherever they could and for whomever they could. That meant back-breaking laborious hours under the blistering sun, being paid a pittance. Without parents in charge, little leniency was offered when a boy fell ill or was overwhelmed by the job. This is an industry that also hired many girls for less arduous jobs such as sorting of fruit and vegetables. 2. Piccolo Ludwig Bemelmans, author of the Madeline series of books for children, described the lives of the Piccolos in his fantastic book When You Lunch with the Emperor. The book is about his youth as an immigrant boy from Austria working in the New York Ritz during the Great Depression. The book recounts vivid and seedy tales from the underbelly of the New York Ritz where he worked as a young man during the Great Depression, after emigrating from Austria-Hungary. 3. Apprenticeships. An apprenticeship for a boy typically began between the ages of 10 and 14. Continuing with the words of Ludwig Bemelmans above, he Piccolo was looked upon with envy by the apprentices of plumbers and cobblers. They had the red ears, too, but not enough to eat, and no cigarettes, no drinks, no tips. Considering that in the Middle Ages a boy had to pay to become an apprentice, it was something of a novelty that he would even be paid for the job in the 19th and 20th centuries. 4. Cannery worker. Working in the canneries meant standing for hours in the freezing Atlantic winters chopping, packing, and hauling fish and other foods. Canning was still a fairly young enterprise and, like so many other jobs on this list, needed a big workforce of unskilled laborers. Children, like the boy above, aged 9, were paid up to 5 cents per box that they processed. Notwithstanding the dangers of working in such terrible conditions, terrible enough for grown men, the boys were also required to handle extremely dangerous cutting tools and canning machines designed to slice and seal metal. One can only imagine the casualties that would have emerged from the sheds and boatyards where these boys worked. 5. Bootblack, shoeshine boy. There is an anecdote that tells us that Joe Kennedy, former President Kennedy's father, upon being given stock tips from a shoeshine boy realized that if a kid who polished dirty old boots for a living could trade stock in the market, it might be time to get out of it. He immediately sold all of his stock and avoided the massive market crash the next day that launched the Great Depression. 6. Cotton mill worker. The invention of the cotton gin, and a variety of other mechanical devices soon after, was a godsend in the post-slavery West. The American Civil War and the abolition of the slave trade by Republican President Lincoln led to a shortage of cotton in Europe which verged on a crisis for the nation. But, as life returned somewhat to normal in the States with a new approach to the cultivation and picking of cotton, the industrial inventions brought things back to their peak and beyond. 7. Soldier. Child soldiers are known to exist today, but this is true going right back to ancient time when the Romans regularly hired boys as young as 14 for the general army. In recent times, for example El Salvador in the 1990s, boys fought for the rebel troops and many child soldiers were seen across the Balkan region during their troubles. The most shocking example of an historic nature is that of Momcilo Gavric, the 7-year-old boy who was accepted into a Serbian army unit and made a corporal a year later at the age of 8. He joined due to being orphaned when his family were killed in the war. He assisted military in the destruction of the troops who had taken the lives of his parents. 8. Prostitute. One of the lowest jobs on this list is, tragically, one most frequently seen still today and perhaps performed in even greater frequency than in the past due to the secret nature of many online apps and websites abused for the purpose. Child prostitution is most frequently associated with girls, but it is equally common and harmful amongst boys. In Victorian England, Jack Saul caused a scandal when he announced himself, shamelessly, as a sodomite and a professional Mary Ann in court at the age of 18, admitting to an already long and prosperous career as a rent boy, indicating that he had begun in the profession back in Ireland as a child. Rumours circulated that one of his clients was the handsome Prince Albert, a mere 7 years older than he and the eldest grandson of Queen Victoria, then reigning. 9. Mine worker. While we are busy fretting over our children playing video games or binge-watching disturbing YouTube videos when they should be out playing in the sun, we should spare a thought for the boys of days gone by who spent their entire childhood deep beneath the surface of the earth performing menial tasks for the men who labored to bring coal to the surface to keep the machinery of the world turning. While our children have the promise of a future of opportunities, the boys who worked these mines had no future beyond that of lung disorders and hard labor for a lifetime. And that was the good news. The bad news was that you ran the risk, daily, of being killed by a mine collapse. The eyes of the child pictured here cannot hide his acute awareness of that fact. 10. Chimney sweep. The tragic life of the chimney sweep all too often ended in death. Alas, the risk of death was deemed a necessary evil, as the lack of clean chimneys would have been catastrophic on a far larger scale for city dwellers through uncontrolled fires and freezing temperatures. In fact, it was the Great Fire of London in 1666 that led to the adoption of boys, some as young as 4, for the task. The little boys were purchased from their parents and forced into tiny chimneys with brushes to do a job that was otherwise impossible due to the sharp angles and considerable length of some chimneys. So yeah, these were top 10 terrible jobs boys have done through history. We will see you again in the next video. Peace out.